Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's great. We get to preview a full week of college football games that we didn't really get to watch live because we were actually busy working, because 3:30 is literally the worst game time in terms of being able to watch any other games going on around the country. So you got to watch more than I did because you sit somewhere where there's TVs and computers and stuff. So you may be carrying me today for the first time ever.
Well, you say preview, but I think you meant to say is review, or
which is the one that happens after. I forget.
If you want to preview, we can nail this thing. I think we could do a pretty good job if we want to do a preview show. But no, this is our weekend recap. And yes, Tom doesn't get to watch much. The 3:30, as Tom said, is terrible. I get to watch a little bit of the noon games, but not from my seat in the press box because it's 1,000 degrees and the TVs are like literally above your head, so you can't even see it. So you have to go sit in the media workroom with, and it's sometimes there are photographers there and it's terrible. Tom will tell you, photographers and writers are never meant to be together, but sometimes you have to cram them all in the same room because the photographers like to eat people food. And it is very annoying when they come upstairs to eat the people food that the writers get.
Photographers and writers are like oil and water. The photographers are the oil because they don't bring us water down at the bunker down by the field. So we just end up having you go down. It's like I'm stuffing my backpack full of water I'm evacuating before a hurricane or something like that. So I had like 4 bottles of water stuffed in my backpack and drank them throughout the day. So it was good. It was I was plenty hydrated as it turned out, which is good. So but yes, they don't they try not to let us hang out. We are natural enemies in the wild.
It is true. I was going to try to remember to bring some water down at the end of the game, and I completely forgot. But I just wanted to let you know that I was thinking about you during the game, not so much as the game was ending, and I had to, I had my own priorities, and I completely forgot. But that's neither here nor there.
I will tell my heat stroke that it's the thought that counts. I'm not sure if my heat stroke will believe it, but
as the ambulance takes you away, I will say, I meant to bring water. Anyway, so let's discuss the week that was for college football, which we were talking about this a little bit before the show. Every single week from here on out, there is going to be and I think Phil Collins probably said it best when he said we're living in a land of confusion. And also, I was going to use some other Phil Collins lyrics, but none are coming to my mind right now. But every week is going to be its own, like, I don't understand. And I think I wonder how many fan bases are confused at games themselves while they're watching this team. I don't know if it's like the long haul COVID situation that we're still dealing with it. Is it the super seniors that are almost holding back the new blood? And I think there's something to talk about there with maybe Ohio State specifically, but there's just, for a lot of reasons, and maybe it's the super seniors that are, I think you talked about it after the game yesterday, that it is smashing everything together. And there's, at this point, there only seems to be one, I can't say great team. Like Alabama is the best team, but Florida came back on them. Alabama is flawed as well. There are no great teams maybe at this point, Alabama being the best team. Nobody is certainly above being beaten, although somebody's going to have to catch Alabama on an off day. It's just an odd year. I don't think this week is any kind of outlier in terms of any oddities, and it's just going to get weirder and weirder as the pressure builds.
What's interesting now is I can frame this around Alabama, or I can frame this around Colorado State. And I'm still trying to decide which end of the college football spectrum I want to have this conversation about. Let's get a little weird. Let's talk about Colorado State. So for those who maybe haven't been paying particularly close attention to Colorado State, and shame on you, Colorado State in week 1 lost to South Dakota State. And then in week 2, they didn't just lose, they lost decisively to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, who lost in week 1, 23-3 at home to East Tennessee State, which is rather famously an FCS team. So week 1, Colorado State lost to a good FCS team. Week 2, they lost to a team that lost to a not good FCS team. And then in week 3, they traveled across the country to Toledo, a Toledo team that just gave Notre Dame a tremendous scare in South Bend. And Tony, what did they do? Just as I'm sure I predicted, if you go back and listen to our preview show, they beat Toledo in the Glass Bowl 22-6. Like, what? There is no logical anything going on this year. There is, I think, when you're talking about a college football season and the craziness of a college football season, when we're projecting future Ohio State offensive linemen, the rule is you never compare anyone to Orlando Pace. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about craziness of college football seasons, you never compare any season to 2007, because that was the season that was, Kansas is number 2 at one point, and USF is number 2 at one point, and Boston College is in the top 5. And, this is like the wildest, craziest year of all time. We're not quite to that point yet, but this absolutely is a year when, I think everyone came in and said, well, there's a distinct top 5 in the sport, and then there's a huge gap, and then there's everyone else. It's definitely not a top 5 this year. It might be a top 1 or a top 2, because Georgia looked pretty good the last couple of weeks as well, but I'm not sold on the fact that they're going to skate through this whole season either.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll ever get to 2007 levels, because I don't know that voters will allow their preconceived notions to drop so far out of the top 10. They'll just continue to like rotate the same top 10. And then I don't know that they bring in the teams from the top 20 will eventually get into that. I think they just go from 20 to 11 and 10 through 1. Just, you can't get to that next subway car or whatever. Whereas, 2007, I mean, all comers, you want to be number 2, come on in, you can be number 2. And then now just know, once you're number 2, you're going to lose next week. That's the rule. And it's like, well, that's okay. I just want to be number 2. I just want to see my name in the paper, and boy, howdy, you will. And so I think there's going to be levels of craziness that rival 2007 at times, but just the overall, yeah, I mean, that's the Mount Rushmore where all 4 heads are 2007, and everything else is just a bunch of rocks. So let's discuss, I guess, Alabama and Florida, because there are some interesting things there. Alabama started out that game 21-3. That was the last time I looked at it, until it was maybe like the 4th quarter or 3rd quarter when Florida had started to make a comeback. 91 yards rushing for Alabama. Let's go ahead and give Florida credit on that one. 245 yards rushing for Florida, and that was without their real running quarterback. Emory Jones played 19 carries, 77 yards. Still can't really throw the ball all that well. He was 18 for 28 for 195 yards with a pick, but there's some bad throws in there and just some questionable decisions. But the fact that Florida is able to run right now, with knowing that Alabama doesn't probably have the highest amount of respect for the passing game. If you've got a quarterback that can run on Alabama, and this is the first time since, I think last year in week 3 was the last time anybody rushed for this many yards against Bama. It was Ole Miss. The year before, it was Ole Miss again. So Ole Miss has been able to do this against Alabama, but has also been able to throw it. We'll see if they can do that this year. But I think if people stopped watching this game after the first quarter, they just assume Alabama is untouchable. If they watch it for the rest of the game, they'll see like, okay, there's a shot here.
Yeah, and you look at the top line numbers, and it's like, okay, yes, it was a 2-point game at the end, but maybe Alabama stopped playing, maybe whatever. But Florida outgained them by a yard per play. It was like 6.1 to 5 flat yards per play. Alabama running the ball they only had 38% of their rushes go for 4 yards or more. 38%. I mean, you think about Alabama and the offensive line that they typically have, you're typically able to just mash people. And 23% were stuffed for no gain or loss, 42% for less than 2 yards, and only 38% more than 4 yards. They had more plays stuffed for 2 yards or less than they did for 4 yards or more on the ground. That is stunning to me. And Florida, by comparison, 55%, 4 yards or more. Like that is, you're controlling the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball at Florida. That doesn't happen to Alabama. That was very surprising to me. So, do I think Alabama's going 9-3 this year? No, in fact, I do not. But there is no 2019 LSU this year. There is not a team that is just going to sail through their whole season and have no real serious challenges. That is, that you keep looking at teams and going, well, maybe it's Alabama and everyone else. It's like, no, maybe it's no one and everyone else.
I can't wait until we see Alabama, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, and see how those games go. Let's move to maybe the most surprising score of the day, which was Oklahoma 23-16 over Nebraska, which I think we both maybe took the over on that one. I don't know if we took Oklahoma and laid the points, but this was it was 7-3 at half. It was 16-9 in the fourth quarter, and a pretty surprising outcome. I guess maybe the Oklahoma defense is better, but then you see Adrian Martinez is 19 of 25 for 289 yards and a touchdown and an interception. And that's one of those things where watching this game a little bit, whenever Nebraska would do something good on offense, they would compromise themselves with a penalty or throw an interception or just make some sort of a mistake. They could not enjoy their success. They could not maintain their success. They couldn't handle it, and they would sabotage themselves. And the Oklahoma offense was surprisingly ineffective, even though they did rush for 194 yards. Spencer Rattler was 24 of 34 for 214 yards, one touchdown. They're still waiting for him to become that Heisman candidate that everybody thinks he's going to be, and he's not alone in that. Like, there's some quarterbacks having some issues and just maybe not exploding, and he was fine, but overall, just a surprising outcome where Nebraska had a shot at the end in that fourth quarter, clearly, to go ahead and take this one. You never felt like they would, because that's not really, I don't want to be mean, that's not really Adrian Martinez's game. Like the fourth quarter, I am the fourth quarter. Yeah, essentially, like he's, nobody at Nebraska has done that for a while, but like somebody needs to just take charge and go win a game. And that's not something they've been able to do under Scott Frost.
This was another one that was very surprising to me. I mean, just like Alabama getting kind of beat on the offense, on the trenches on both sides of the ball, Nebraska passed for 3 yards per play, yards per pass, more than Oklahoma did. When you think about Oklahoma, it's, big explosive plays in the air and just boom, 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 move the chains, and everything's being done through the air. And Oklahoma had 6.2 yards per pass, Nebraska 9.6. I mean, that's stunning to me. Spencer Rattler getting outpassed by Adrian Martinez in a game that's close. This was not Nebraska had to make this huge dramatic comeback. So, you're down by 40 points in the first half. So of course you have to throw. That wasn't it. It was just Spencer Rattler was just not super effective. This is one of the few games we actually got to watch. This was on in the press box while you were grudgingly eating lunch next to me. So you got to watch it. And it was just like, I kept turning around like, am I reading the score right? Like, is it really, it's almost halftime and it's still 7-3. This is the second time in 3 weeks that you've looked at Oklahoma and gone, yeah, I don't know what the deal with them is. Because week 1 against Tulane, they had the offense, but the defense just completely cratered. This week, the defense was okay. I mean, they gave up a lot of yards. But I mean, the yards per play was essentially even. It was 5.8 compared to 5.9. So it was essentially even, but you gave up a bunch of yards. You gave up, it is not what you expect from Oklahoma. But it's, they're a little bit like Ohio State, where it's like 1 week this thing works, but the other thing doesn't work. Now, the next time, okay, well, then now the thing that worked before, that doesn't work anymore. But the thing that didn't work before, well, now that's better. So it feels like there's just a lot of inconsistency at the top end of the sport right now, that's what leads to those kind of wild, wide open years.
Yeah, and looking at Nebraska had 5 receivers with at least 120-yard reception in that game. Oklahoma's long pass is 23 yards. Nebraska had 4 guys do better than that. personally. So there's still some issues there with that Oklahoma defense. Although, bend but don't break, and just wait for Nebraska to make a mistake, and chances are they're going to help you with that. That's always been the situation with Adrian Martinez. Eventually, he'll give you the ball or not convert on third down, and you'll be better for it.
And one thing that was interesting to me is both Florida and Nebraska were within a possession of pulling these big upsets. They were both -1 in turnovers. It wasn't like this was like a turnover fueled thing that, they got outplayed, but they were +5 in turnovers. Like, no, they were both -1 in turnovers and still almost beat the teams that were favored by so much. That's you can absolutely feel like there is something crazy going on right now.
Well, Tom, let me ask you this. It's a crazy season. This is the first year with name, image, and likeness. Has NIL ruined the game?
I thought you were going with Michigan has actually looked pretty good this year. Is this the year Michigan makes the playoffs out of nowhere?
Now let's stay in the terms of like reality. Has name, image, and likeness destroyed college football forever?
I'm going to go with no, but I don't really have anything to back that up. So
it's just your opinion. Thanks.
Yes. And NIL is fine, everyone. NIL is good for college football. And you know what? Crazy seasons like this are good for college football because super, super predictable college football, like that's great if you're an Ohio State fan or a Clemson fan or an Alabama fan. If you're a fan of any of the other 127 teams in the sport, like that makes it not that fun if you go into the season knowing you have absolutely no chance to win because it's going to be one of these three teams. So it is actually really good for college football to have a good season like this every once in a while. And they're more fun anyway. Like they are more fun sport wide than the season where it's just like, yeah, everything's predictable and like those the crazy endings, the shocking upsets, like that's the great stuff about college football.
Yeah, the 2007 season, we still talk about it. Tom, remember the crazy 2011 season? Remember the crazy 2009 season? Remember the crazy 2016 season? No. Like, yes, I remember those seasons. I don't remember them being remembered for being crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They really stick with you. We'll get to one of those teams that is, well, here's another team enjoying the craziness. Number 5, Iowa, 30-7 over Kent State, or Kent, if you prefer. This Iowa defense continues to play really, really well. They held Kent State to about 264 yards of total offense. Dustin Crum, the Kent State quarterback, can run, and they held him to negative 22 yards rushing. That's obviously a lot of sacks, but also not allowing him to do any damage. Long carry of just 6 yards for him. Just a really, really sound defense. The offense is never fantastic. They did rush for 206 yards. Pretty good average there. Spencer Petras was 25 of 36 for 209 yards. They're doing plenty on offense. The defense continues to be outstanding. Started the game with a safety, and that probably would have been enough to win if they really needed it to. Like, it's like, all right, I just really want to see a 2-0 score. That's all I really want, guys. If that's Kirk Ferentz saying, if you could just give me that, I will retire a happy man. And they would have gone out and done that for him. Just, I compared them to like being smothered by a baby diaper, I think last week. That's what Iowa is. And this was another crotch cradle.
You know what? We're just gonna move on right now, and I'm just gonna talk about something completely different, and that maybe will keep things moving along. We were talking before the show about where is Iowa ranked this week? Is Iowa a top 5 team in the nation? And you look at their resume, and it's like, yeah, I mean, there's a decent chance you could argue that Iowa's a top 5 team. And I don't know that if you're just looking at performance, I don't know that there are 5 teams that have been as consistent as Iowa has been this year. This was a game that we had kind of circled before the year, like, Iowa comes out, they're going to they beat Indiana week 1, they beat Iowa State week 2, and then the classic Kirk Ferentz move is to lose 17-14 to Kent State. And then they didn't do it. And it was just, they were not ever in any real danger at any point in this game. It just, they're not fancy. They averaged 5.73 yards per pass. Like, that's not good. But they averaged 5.42 yards per run. And it's like, well, if you outrush your opponent by 2 yards per rush, like, and you have a good defense, the yard where the passing is basically the same, and you're rushing for 2 more yards per game, you can just kind of strangle your opponent for 60 minutes and win the game. That's just, they were -1 in turnovers, but they had enough of a talent advantage and enough of an execution advantage that this is a team that I think they still feel like they're going to go on the road and lose one. But, without even looking at their home schedule this year, I feel pretty confident that this is a year that Iowa goes undefeated at home. I don't know who else they have coming. I think they have Penn State coming into Iowa City later. This just looks like a team that they may lose a game on the road at some point, but whoever's coming to Iowa City, like, you're gonna go home with a very frustrating loss.
Like why did this happen? We knew what they were going to do on defense because that's all they ever do on defense. We had a good plan. Like, what happened? Let's move to another frustrated fan base, perhaps at this point. Clemson wins 14-8 at home against Georgia Tech. Clemson manages 284 yards of total offense. The week before, Georgia Tech held Kennesaw State to 265 yards of total offense. So before Clemson fans get upset, realize you did 19 yards better than Kennesaw State against Georgia Tech. And this is becoming an issue for Clemson. We saw them not perform. The offense basically get shut out against Georgia Tech or Georgia earlier. You know what? Maybe they should just stop playing these Georgia teams. Let's table that discussion. DJ Uiagalelei was 18 of 25 for just 126 yards passing. That's not good enough. 158 yards rushing. Tom, anytime, and we see Clemson relying on freshman running back Will Shipley. Anytime you have to rely on a freshman running back to move your offense, you've got problems, buddy.
You do have problems, and he at one point I did not see what happened with him. He got hurt at one point last night. I don't know if he ended up coming back in the game or not, but Will Shipley. But this offense bad. This offense is like objectively bad. And I think the first week you kind of went like, well, maybe Georgia's defense is just absolute world beaters. And let's do the same. Let's do the same thing we did earlier with Georgia Tech or with Colorado State, and like, let's make sense of these results. Georgia Tech lost to Northern Illinois at home. Lost to Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois, who lost to Michigan by 7,000 points on Saturday. Georgia Tech then goes in and gives Clemson in Death Valley, like, literally all they can handle. Yards per pass, Georgia Tech was 5.5 to 5 for Clemson. Yards per rush, it was dead even 3.89 to 3.88. Like, it's like there's nothing. Like, what Georgia Tech's defense, which is not particularly good, did to Clemson's offense exactly what Clemson's offense did to Georgia Tech's defense did to Georgia Tech's offense, which is also not particularly good. That's a problem. Like, that is like officially a problem for Clemson. I'm not sure quite what to make of them. It just, you look at them, and I think Clemson fans right now are kind of pulling their hair out the way Ohio State fans are, where it's like, there's so much talent here. You've got all these 5 stars. How on earth can you not beat these teams that have, like, there are, how many kids on the Georgia Tech team would Clemson have taken? 2, 3, maybe out of the whole team. I mean, the same thing for Tulsa. And I don't know if there's even that many for Ohio State, that Ohio State would have taken 2 or 3 kids from Tulsa. You should not be having those games against that kind of team. But that's, you can tell what the sort, why people are frustrated. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know when that gets better for Clemson. If you can't run the ball, like, that's a problem. And we've seen Clemson's offensive line. Clemson's offensive line is a disaster. Clemson's offensive line has been a disaster for a couple of years. You've seen that absolutely murder Florida State over the last couple of years. If you have a bad offensive line, like, that will really ruin your life. It feels like maybe that's at least one of the issues for Clemson this year.
The biggest play on offense from Clemson was a 17-yard pass. So yeah, exactly. So, and when I say that it's bad news to be relying on a freshman running back like Will Shipley, and then obviously alluding to the nod that we know what Ohio State is going through as well, but at least Ohio State has a defense to fall back on. So anybody clamoring into my mentions can just calm down about that. but it really is like Clemson at this point. Their defense is going to have to keep them in games, and even then, it's like the defense is going to have to win them games as they did in this one because the offense, you can't expect them at this point. You can't go in assuming you're going to score 31 or something like that because that's no guarantee. Now, I do expect them to get better, but like we saw DJ do just fine against Notre Dame last year. Did well enough. I mean, threw for three or 400 yards, and you just assume things would be better. But that's some discouraging stuff going on there in Clemson. Let's go to go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to move on to Cincinnati IU. If you would like to talk about some good play, Cincinnati is at this point. I'm not going to say they're a team of destiny or anything like that because it's easy to have destiny when you're playing against Michael Penix, who is really, really not great right now and is throwing interceptions like, guys on fire trucks throwing out candy in parades. Basically, he's like, here, everybody, just here's some Tootsie Rolls, here's some suckers, here's a pick six, go enjoy it. And he's not doing well right now. Jack Tuttle probably gives them a better chance to win. I'm not sure if Tuttle is fine or not, but for all of the people going back to Ohio State, like all of the people who want to see another quarterback play, Indiana at least has a quarterback, Jack Tuttle, who beat Wisconsin last year, who has played, who has started games. And again, I just assume he's healthy, but he's not playing. And Michael Penix, I'm sure they're trying to work him through this. And this was a game that Indiana was leading in the fourth quarter. So you're not going to bench somebody at that point. Cincinnati had to score 15 points in the final quarter to win this one, but they're just they don't beat themselves. They came in knowing that this is going to be possibly their stiffest test. We'll see. They also have Notre Dame, or is Indiana has Notre Dame. Cincinnati has Notre Dame, right?
Cincinnati has Notre Dame, yes.
Yeah, so like there will be one more test, but I don't know. Maybe this is I don't even know who is better than if Indiana and Notre Dame are better right now. Like Notre Dame would likely beat them because Indiana would make mistakes, but that doesn't mean Notre Dame is some world beater because I could see Cincinnati beating Notre Dame by 10 points at this point, just waiting for Notre Dame to screw something up. But like Cincinnati wasn't fantastic, 210 yards passing, 118 yards rushing, but they do enough. And then they do enough so well that they win by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, it was close. It was this back and forth seesaw game. And, at one point I was down on the sidelines trying to get my phone to work and talking to someone else who was trying to get their phone to work to find out what the final score ended up being in this game. And it was, someone won by a field goal. Like, nope, someone won by 14 points. Like, what? How did that happen? But yeah, Indiana, 5 turnovers. You cannot turn the ball over 5 times, be -3 in turnovers against a team that's as good as Cincinnati. I mean, that is what Cincinnati lives on. Is Indiana outgained them on the ground or on a yards per play basis, outgained them by more than a yard per play. But if you're -3 in turnovers, that will negate an awful lot of those gains. And I think we've talked about EPA on the show before, expected points added. It's an advanced stat, which is basically, per play, how much did you improve your likelihood of scoring points or, make your likelihood of scoring points worse? Indiana's total EPA was -22 on the day. Like the expected number of points they should score, they finished 22 points worse than that. 18 points of that was the offense. -18 on the offensive EPA. Basically, based on where they had the ball, they should have scored 18 more points than they did on Saturday. Guess what? If they'd scored 18 more points, guess what they would have done? Won the game. And if you look at, they have a graph on a wonderful site called GameOnPaper.com, which I love. They have a graph showing the EPA of the game, and it's the two lines are like stock lines, and Cincinnati starts out going down, down, down. Indiana's going up, up, up. And then just about halftime, Indiana just craters. It looks like the 1929 stock market crash. And it's like, oh, well, then they get back up again. And then they're right back down at the end of the game as well. It was just, can't turn the ball over. Write that down. Can't turn the ball over. You don't need advanced stats to tell you that, but it doesn't hurt.
We discussed in depth the Ohio State win over Tulsa in our instant reaction Buckeye Weekly, so you can find that. I would just say that Trevian Henderson gets his first start. Tom and I both, before the season, said, I wouldn't be shocked if he's starting by November. Not a total shock that he's starting at this point either, even though they only let the guy carry the ball twice in the opener. And then 7 or 9 carries last week or whatever it was. But clearly it's his job now. And I was looking up some stats, and I'm guessing these all came yesterday, but he now leads the nation in 30-yard carries with 4, and that's in 38 attempts. So 10.5% of his carries go at least 30 yards. And if you want to throw in his catches, I'm guessing, 8 or 9% of his touches go at least 40 yards. And that's a guy that obviously that's not going to stay that high, but you're seeing some really, really positive returns and just small investments. Now, Tom, I think rather than diversify, I think you put everything in Henderson and see where it takes you.
Just Dogecoin to the moon. Absolutely. Just everything and just shovel it on there. Yeah. I think you have to just, he's got to be the central focus of this offense right now. I mean, until you see otherwise, and you have to, there's going to be some load management necessary here. This is still a true freshman who did not play his senior season of high school football because of COVID. So you have to be responsible with the number of carries you're giving him, but you also have to recognize this is the guy who gives you the best chance right now of putting the ball in the end zone, which is a really important part of offensive football, putting the ball in the end zone. You've got the wide receivers, but CJ Stroud just looked off all day on Saturday against Tulsa. Trevian Henderson absolutely did not look off. Trevian Henderson looked exactly right. And, we just talked about EPA. I'm going to give you the yards EPA per play for every time Ohio State rushed the ball, they gave themselves basically an extra 0.38 points. So they increased their likelihood of scoring by basically 1/3 of a point every time they ran the ball. Every time they threw the ball, they lowered their likelihood of scoring by about 1/10 of a point. I mean, it's like, okay, there's almost, it was 0.38 to minus 0.008, which these are a lot of numbers, which is great for a podcast. I know, get your calculators out, kids. It's time for Buckeye Weekly. But, essentially, you increased your likelihood of scoring a point by 1/2 of a point every time you ran as compared to pass. Those numbers are telling you something. Those numbers are telling you, run the dang ball, Paul. You gotta, that's what you got to do. And, I didn't realize until I pulled up the advanced box score, 82 plays from scrimmage for Tulsa, 82 plays from scrimmage. That is a lot. Ohio State had only 65. The defense is going to have to find a way to get off the field. They gave up a lot of 3rd downs again on Saturday. And, there are issues there that I don't know. I can tell you the Ohio State coaching staff doesn't have an answer on how to solve some of those issues right now. And so therefore, I think it would be really unfair for you to ask me how to solve those issues. But if the coaching staff doesn't know, I don't have much of a chance of solving those problems myself.
Well, a rather cowardly answer on your part there. Trevian Henderson currently 4th in the Big Ten in rushing, 115.3 yards per game, leading the Big Ten in rushing at 9.1 yards per carry, leading the Big Ten in yards per carry there. So, as long as you keep averaging 9 yards a carry, that's like a first down every other carry. These are numbers, Tom, that I could do. Expected first yards per carry by Trevian Henderson, it's 9.1.
What makes this podcast work is I'm the advanced stat guy, and you're the rudimentary stat guy. So we've got a little something for everyone. That's why this all works.
Totally. For those people who think Tom is too smart for the show, I bring it down for the people. That's we're serving 2 masters here, a smart one and a dumb one, and we try to give it all to all people. Tom, speaking of smart and dumb, let's talk about Penn State and Auburn.
Can I share one of my favorite Steve Spurrier lines about the fire in the Auburn library? There's like the mid '90s. There's a fire. You could see like the smoke rising on the ESPN broadcast over Jordan-Hare Stadium, and there's a fire in the Auburn library. And Steve Spurrier in the post-game press conference says, the real, I heard a bunch of books got burned. The real tragedy is some of them hadn't even been colored in yet. Like that's mean. Why would you say that, Steve Spurrier? That's so mean. It's so funny. Arguably true, but so mean.
He was before his time and could have really been used in the age of Twitter, and that would have been great. Instead, we've got what we've got, and we're trying to make the most of it. But let's talk about Penn State. 28-20 win over Auburn. Controlled the game pretty much throughout. The most amazing part of this game for me was, and again, Penn State can't run the ball, so that is an issue. That's been an issue all season long. They rushed for 84 yards on 33 carries, so this is continuing to be a concern. Despite that, however, Sean Clifford, quarterback, was 28 of 32 or 280 yards and 2 touchdowns, had an interception. So only 3 of his 32 passes, Tom, hit the ground. So that's impressive. He's playing decently well, had a 20-yard rush in this game as well. So I've of the opinion that Sean Clifford is going to hold them back, can't take them as far as they need to. Right now, however, it's almost like he's going to take them as far as they can go because the running game isn't there. Defense is playing pretty well enough. But if they can't get that running game, you can't expect Sean Clifford to complete, I don't know, was it like 92% of his passes every game?
Right. And, the interesting thing about this game was Penn State won by 8. They were -2 in turnovers. So this could have been a lot worse. They didn't finish some drives. But yeah, you're right. I mean, let's look at the advanced stats. The EPA per play for Auburn was basically like 0.1 for running, 0.1 for passing. Like they were just kind of like, everything was just kind of like, okay. That tells you exactly what Tony just said. The Penn State defense was okay. They weren't dominant. They weren't terrible. They were just fine. Yards per play, EPA per play, passing the ball, 0.56 for Penn State. Every time Penn State threw the ball, they basically got themselves a half a point. Every time they ran the ball, they lost themselves 0.13 points. I mean, so you are, Tony, I don't know if you can do the math. The difference is 0.69 points every time they threw the ball as compared to running the ball. I mean, that's just, you have to be able to run the ball at some point. This is one of these, this is going to catch up with you at some point. Let me tell you, let me spoil the surprise for you right now. This catches up with them in Iowa City. They have to go to Iowa City later in the year. That's when this catches up with them 100%. They've also got to go to Columbus. Now, we'll have to roll the 20-sided die that week to see if that's a week that Ohio State can stop the run or Ohio State can stop the pass. I mean, that'll be an exciting mystery. Which one of the weeks is that when Penn State comes to town? But that is, if you cannot run the ball, it is going to catch up with you. That is just, this is how this works. And if you have watched college football long enough, you have seen this over and over and over again. Being able to just throw the ball, that's a great way to go do exactly what Ohio State did against Oregon. You go up and down the field and you pile up lots and lots of yards. But if you can't run the ball, you end up bogging down in the red zone just enough that it ends up costing you games. So yes, great win for Penn State. That's a big win for the Big Ten too. Not that that's going to be like a big talking point now, but the point is it's not going to be a big talking point now. It's not going to be, Auburn's only 5th in the SEC West, and they went up to State College, a big whiteout, and they beat Penn State. And look at Penn State 2nd in the Big Ten East. And Big Ten must be terrible. Was that a regional accent? I don't know. It's not as good as my. It's not my. That's my Barner accent. Not as good as my Australian, but
no.
You could hear that coming if Penn State lost that game to Auburn. So Penn State has avoided. Penn State has. If you've been on the Penn State message boards, this is one of the most ironic things in history. But for once, Penn State has prevented terrible internet takes. Can you believe it? I can't believe it.
Can you say "War Damn Eagle" in your Australian accent?
I'm gonna have to work my way back. I'm in a very derpy Southerner place right now, so I'm not ready to I'm not.
All
I'm
right.
not right now
You,
in
you
a.
you think about that. Did you see, and I haven't seen it, I've only read about it and heard about it, how the refs took a down away from Penn State and made them punt on third down? Were you aware of this?
I did. Yes, they punt the opposite of the famous fifth down play for
Yes.
Colorado. Yes, yeah, that was. I haven't. I have not watched the video, but I read about it, and it was like, how? Like
And then
there's
they reviewed
there's
it.
all sorts of replay. How does no one in the stadium go? It's only third down. Review it. Like
They
what?
did review it, and the review was like, "Yep, it's fourth down." Like you you have a pass play on second down that is called an intentional grounding. So you lose it down, it goes to third. They went from second to fourth, and basically James Franklin had no recourse because like how do you prove a negative, or whatever logic he was using obviously wasn't good enough for the refs, which and then it's like, don't worry, replay will take care of this. We got replay, so let's just send it upstairs. And I don't understand how that happens. The SEC of course apologizes, and that'll never happen again, and nor should it. I mean, that is a mistake that should never happen again. But I'm just glad, Tom, for the sake of Penn State fans, that it was not Big Ten officials who made this mistake, because as we all know, the Big Ten is out to get Penn State. Penn State should leave the conference. And I'm speaking, this is the Penn State fan in me saying the Big Ten has been out to get Penn State. That is why Penn State has the only times they win it, it's in spite of the Big Ten. They've never wanted us here. And maybe it's time for us being Penn State, me being a Penn State fan, to leave for the ACC or anywhere, or maybe even go back to being an independent, because things weren't so bad then.
Yeah, it has a newly reborn Rutgers chased Penn State out of the Big Ten. My column. That's I kind of just want to put that on Twitter right now, and just no context, just put that on Twitter right now. Yeah.
A couple other games we can touch on here. The Notre Dame survives against Purdue 27-13. Does that make Notre Dame the best team in Indiana this year? Do they? What is is that the Redenbacher Cup? I don't know what. It's that the commander in chief. Or what does the best team in Indiana get? Should it that's the Tom Raper RV Chalice? I don't know exactly what that deserves, but congratulations to Notre Dame.
They only have that competition for basketball. Sorry, you're thinking. You must be thinking of a different state.
Yeah,
Notre Dame is just. They're another team that it's like they've been in the college football playoff conversation enough that you just sort of assume like, well, they must be playoff caliber. And it's like you look at the results and they're another one that's just like it is not happening right now. I mean, Florida State week 1, Florida State is a bad team, and they barely escaped Florida State. And then you barely escape Toledo. And then Purdue, which is no great shakes by any means. I mean, Purdue might be the 11th best team in the Big Ten, 12th best team in the Big Ten. And that was, I mean, Purdue was right in there for a decent chunk of this game. And it was just, this is just a bizarre year. And it's like everyone is just missing. And this is another one where Purdue lost by 10 points, 14 points, lost by 14 points. They were -3 in turnovers. Like if the turnovers are even, that game's a different game. I mean, this is a wild year. There's just all the things that you think of as like sort of sure things are like, there are almost no sure things this year.
Now, Notre Dame and Wisconsin play in Chicago next week. The Badgers, I believe, had the week off. We'll see how they do in that one. I'm a little disappointed that UCLA lost to Fresno State. That game featured 3 drives of 75 yards in the final 3 minutes as Fresno State took the lead, UCLA took the lead back, and then Fresno State won it in the final seconds. Last game I want to touch on, Tom, Michigan State at Miami. Went down to Miami, beat breaks off the Hurricanes there at the end. I don't want to say Michigan State is back, but in Big Ten terms, in Big Ten East terms, they are close to being back, in that you might want to pay attention to them. You might want to prepare for them. you might not want to just rely on them to, oh, don't worry, they'll make a mistake. They'll get a personal foul call that will, help us out. That'll stop a drive, that'll secure possession for us. You can't just keep relying on Michigan State to screw things up anymore because they're playing pretty well right now. And as long as they continue to get outings from Kenneth Walker, 27 carries, 172 yards, really along of just 26 yards. So it was just consistent yards with Walker. They rushed for 193 in that one. Peyton Thorne continues to play well, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. Miami, of course, not as great as everybody thinks, which is typically the case, except for when people stop thinking Miami was good. Every other time, though, people overrate them. And now Miami will finally drop out of the rankings. They were 24th coming into this game. I think, Tom, maybe it's time to start thinking about the Spartans and the top 25. Not that the top 25 is important.
Are you ready for my hottest take of the week?
Yes.
This is super hot. Ready? Michigan plays Michigan State on October 30th. It is entirely possible that game could be the one that ends up determining the Big Ten East rather than another game that happens that day, Ohio State versus Penn State. It is possible. It is possible. I'm not saying it's going to. I'm just saying.
I think you just said it's going to.
I'm just saying, listen, that was a game I thought we looked at as like this weird novelty act before the game, before the season. Michigan has been annihilating people. Now, Michigan is not playing great teams, but Michigan is doing to the not great teams what you typically think of Ohio State doing to not great teams. Meanwhile, Ohio State is doing what you typically think of Michigan doing to not great teams. That's what Ohio State's doing to them right now. And Michigan State, they're not like the full-blown 2015 Michigan State just yet or 2013 Michigan State just yet, but they whipped Miami's butt along both lines of scrimmage. I mean, they just kicked their butts. Plus 0.25 yards per EPA per play on the ground for Michigan State, minus 0.56 for Miami on the ground. Basically, Miami lost. Every time Miami decided we're going to run the ball, it was like, well, you just lost half a point. Good job. Every time Michigan State ran the ball, picked up a quarter of a point. That adds up over the course of a game, as it turns out. This is. I feel like Michigan State is really ahead of schedule. We're ahead of where I thought they were going to be. And, you find a good running back, that goes a long way to doing it. I mean, Kenneth Walker III is like, okay, this is one of the things that you have to have because the line play is usually pretty good there, but you got to have the guy that can turn the holes into something bigger. They have that now. Go through the Big Ten East, and it's like there are no more gimmies there. There are 7 teams in the Big Ten East that are at least decent teams. You need to start talking about the Big Ten East the way you talk about the SEC West. It's like, well, yes, even Arkansas, which isn't that good, is still a pretty decent team. That's how the Big Ten East is this year. You even the Marylands and the Rutgers, they and Michigan State, who we came into the season thinking this is going to take Mel Tucker a while to get this going. Nope. No, they have been very thorough in and you can, this is not us overreacting to one game. We talked, now I'm trying to remember if we had this conversation on the air or afterwards or whatever, but that Michigan State money line this week was plus 190. It's that's, as a 6-point underdog against Miami, you could see this coming. This is a team that can just whip your butt in the trenches. And if you're not good in the trenches, they can make it a real unpleasant day. That's the kind of Michigan State team. That's how Michigan State has to win. And it's oh, okay, so this is now a pretty good, this is now one of the good Michigan State teams. Take all those teams on the East. You've got some, Wisconsin's pretty good on the West. Iowa's pretty good on the West. This is actually, there's some, Illinois is not great. Purdue, I don't think is super fantastic, but this is on the whole, I think, a much better Big Ten than we have seen in recent years.
There are 5 teams in the Big Ten East that are 3-0 on the season. Only 2 of them are ranked, being Michigan and Penn State. I'm not sure that Maryland or Rutgers will get there this week. Michigan State on the back of that Miami win might get them there, but I doubt it at this point. However, if these were SEC West teams, they'd be ranked.
Mm-hmm.
But we know that we don't need to go into all of that. Tom, anything else from you about the weekend before we get out of here? A crazy weekend that it continues to be.
War damn eagle. Was that felt like it was drifting into Massachusetts and not Australian. Not my best work, I don't think.
that was a northeastern accent. Good pointing that out. I would agree with that. Can you say something about parking your car? War damn eagle, where can I park my car in Australian, please?
No, I absolutely cannot. We need to get we need to get another Jesse Mirko interview this week. I'm just going to say, so Jesse, do you know what they say at Auburn? Do you know they have a thing? It's weird. Do you know what they say? Because they're the Tigers, but it's about a bird. Have you heard that? Can you say it for me? Okay, there we go. All right. Is it fun to say?
You can hear it, and then you could practice it, and then you'll get better at it. So,
hey Jesse, where did you park today? Were you in the lot out front, or are you in Harvard Yard?
Yeah, exactly. You hear it, and then you can practice, because Tom, iron sharpens iron. Mm-hmm. And now, Tom, can you say iron sharpens iron with your Australian accent?
And we're out of time for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. We do genuinely appreciate it. It is a delight to be doing these shows and have lots of fun college football to talk about and fun accents to do. Not do well, but to do. So I'm gonna make Tony do like a Serbian accent next time. Like, Tony, read down the AP Top 25, but do it like you're Slovenian. Yeah. So work on your Slovenian accent before the next show.
I could do it in Italian, but in the podcast, you can't see my hands moving. So
we'll save that for when Rutgers is ranked.
Yes, we will. So thank you all for listening. Thank you guys for watching. As always, check out BuckeyeScoop.com. If you're not yet a member, please become one. You're more than welcome to join us there. Also, as you know, you can find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop for all videos like this one. Yesterday's live streams of the post game, coaches interviews, player interviews, all of that good stuff, and every podcast that we drop here at BuckeyeScoop.com. So thank you all for listening, for watching, and we will talk to you guys tomorrow.